The day Hajira left felt like the ground beneath Imran's feet had cracked open, swallowing him whole. It was a sharp, gut-wrenching feeling, the kind you only experience when someone you thought you'd spend forever with suddenly turns away. The words echoed in his mind, replaying over and over like a cruel melody. "I think I'm in love with Imran," she had said, her voice trembling with uncertainty, but carrying the weight of finality. "I need someone who can give me more than what you can, someone who's better for me." The word stung like a slap to the face. Someone who's better for me. Imran felt a deep ache of betrayal, not just because she was leaving, but because she had chosen Imran, someone who seemed to have everything, wealth, charm, and confidence. He wasn't like Imran. She had always said she loved him for his steady nature, for his loyalty, but now it felt like those things weren't enough. They never had been. As Hajira walked out the door, Imran stood frozen in place, the weight of her departure pressing down on him. He wanted to scream, to beg her to stay, but the words wouldn't come. His heart felt like it had shattered into 1,000 pieces. In the silence that followed, the house seemed emptier than ever. The laughter, the shared dreams, they were gone. And in their place, a searing pain of self-doubt began to settle in. For days, Imran wandered through a fog of emotions, replaying every moment of their relationship, wondering where he had gone wrong. He questioned his worth, unable to shake the nagging thought that maybe she was right, maybe he wasn't enough. The love he had given her, the sacrifices he had made, suddenly felt like nothing. It was as though his world had crumbled, and he was left standing amidst the rubble, unable to move forward. The days following Hajira's departure felt like an unrelenting storm, each day dragging on in a blur of confusion, pain, and silence. Imran found himself living in a world where everything he thought he knew was suddenly turned upside down. The man he had been, steadfast, reliable, yet somehow invisible, felt like a stranger. But the worst part wasn't the absence of Hajira, it was the absence of himself. He had spent years shaping his identity around her, around their life together, and now, with her gone, he didn't know who he was without her. At first, he sank into a spiral of self-pity, endlessly replaying the moment she left, asking himself the same questions over and over. What did Imran have that I didn't? The jealousy and frustration boiled inside him, making it hard to breathe. He wanted to hate her for what she'd done, but the love he still had for her made it impossible to break free from the emotional grip she had on him. But at some point, somewhere deep inside, a small, quiet voice broke through the noise. What if this is a push you need to become the person you were meant to be? Imran wasn't sure where that thought came from, but it was enough to make him stop wallowing in his misery. It was the first spark of hope he had felt since the breakup, a glimmer of light that gave him a reason to keep moving. Slowly, he pulled himself out of the fog and started to make small changes. He started working out, not because he cared about his appearance, but because he needed something to channel his anger into. At the gym, he found release, a way to rebuild his physical strength, a way to feel in control of his body when his emotions were out of control. His mornings became ritualistic. He forced himself to get out of bed at 6 a.m., to drink water and eat something healthy. He began reading books on personal development, diving into the works of motivational speakers and life coaches, trying to learn the art of resilience. It wasn't easy. Every word, every piece of advice felt like it bounced off him at first, like he was too broken to absorb any of it. But he kept going. Every morning, he woke up with the intention to be a little better than the day before. The first significant change came when Imran started paying more attention to his career. In the past, he had always kept his job as an accountant steady, but it had never been a passion for him. It was just something to pay the bills. Now, without the distraction of his relationship, he realized that he had been neglecting his potential. He took on new challenges at work, asking for projects that pushed him out of his comfort zone, learning new skills that made him indispensable. He took pride in his work for the first time in years, and it felt good. It felt like he was finally doing something for himself. But the real turning point came when Imran made the decision to stop obsessing over Hajira and Imran. Every time he thought about them, every time he imagined Hajira in Imran's arms, the jealousy and anger flared up. For months, it had consumed him. But one day, during a rare, quiet moment, Imran realized something profound. He wasn't competing with Imran. He was competing with the version of himself that had allowed her to walk away. The realization hit him like a jolt of electricity. He had been so focused on what he didn't have, wealth, excitement, the things that Hajira thought Imran could provide, that he had forgotten what he already had. He had a work ethic, a deep sense of loyalty, and an integrity that was unwavering. And those things, Imran realized, were worth far more than the fleeting thrills that Imran could offer. With this newfound clarity, Imran made a vow to stop living for the approval of others, especially Hajira. He realized that no one could define his worth except for himself. It wasn't easy. There were days when the loneliness was overwhelming, when he missed her more than he cared to admit. But Imran learned to sit with the discomfort, to let it wash over him instead of running from it. Gradually, he began to find joy in the small things again. The sunrise on his morning run, the satisfaction of finishing a challenging project at work, the laughter of friends who supported him through the hardest days. These moments weren't grand, but they were real. And slowly, Imran began to rebuild his life from the inside out. As he grew stronger, both mentally and physically, Imran's world started to shift. He didn't just want to get back at Hajira or prove her wrong anymore. He wanted to prove something to himself. He was capable of so much more than he had ever given himself credit for. He was worthy of happiness and success, regardless of the choices others made. It had been a year since Hajira left, and in those 12 months, Imran had changed in ways he never thought possible. The weight of his heartbreak still lingered in his chest, but it no longer defined him. Where there had once been despair and self-doubt, there was now a quiet confidence. And it wasn't just a physical transformation, though the gym had played its part in giving him the body he had always wanted. It was deeper than that. His mind, his heart, his soul, they had all evolved. Imran's breakthrough came in the form of an unexpected professional opportunity. He had been working tirelessly at his accounting job, diving into projects that stretched him, but there had always been a sense of complacency. He had done well, but he had never truly stood out. That was until his company announced a big, internal restructuring. They were offering a chance for some employees to step into management roles, and Imran, now armed with newfound skills and confidence, decided to apply for one of the positions. It wasn't just an ordinary promotion. It was a leadership role, something he had never dared to consider for himself before. He almost hesitated. The old Imran, the one who used to doubt himself at every turn, would have walked away from this opportunity. But not now. He saw this as a test, a way to prove that he wasn't the same person he had been when Hajira left. This time, he wasn't looking for validation from her or anyone else. He was doing this for himself. When the news came that Imran had been chosen for the management position, it felt surreal. He was officially promoted to senior accountant with an additional managerial responsibility, something he had always brushed aside as out of his league. But it wasn't just a role that was rewarding, it was a recognition. It was a realization that all the effort he had put into himself had paid off. Imran no longer viewed work as a necessary evil. He embraced it as an opportunity to contribute, to lead, and to showcase the strength he had cultivated over the past year. And then the financial success followed. With his new role came a salary increase and a newfound respect within the company. But beyond the numbers, it was a sense of pride that came with knowing he had earned everything on his own. Imran had been working for years, but now, for the first time, his work felt purposeful. He wasn't just another cog in the machine. He was an integral part of the team, someone people looked to for guidance and leadership. The self-doubt that had once plagued him was nowhere to be found. Every day, Imran walked into the office with his head held high. But the success wasn't just professional. It was personal. He had become the kind of man who could walk into any room with a quiet assurance. It wasn't arrogance. It was the kind of confidence that came from doing the work, both on the outside and on the inside. The man who had once been heartbroken and lost, consumed by the pain of a broken relationship, was now thriving in every sense of the word. And the best part? He didn't need anyone else to validate it. The satisfaction came from knowing that it transformed his own life, that he had chosen growth over bitterness, and that he had built something truly meaningful from the rubble of his past. Imran's transformation was no longer just about getting over Hajira. It was about becoming the best version of himself, someone he could be proud of regardless of what anyone else thought. He had turned his pain into power, his rejection into resilience, and his past failures into the foundation of his future success. And that success didn't stop at work. He began to reconnect with old friends, ones he had pushed away during the darker days. He took weekend trips, joined new social groups, and even started volunteering for causes he cared about. Each small victory, each new relationship, made him feel like he was creating a life he could truly be proud of, one that was rooted in his own worth, not in someone else's opinion of him. Then, out of nowhere, Hajira reached out. It had been almost a year since they'd last spoken. Imran had moved on with his life. He had no space for her or for the emotional baggage of their past. But when her message came through on his phone, it was impossible not to feel a rush of emotions. She was asking to meet, saying that she needed to talk. At first, Imran didn't know what to think. Part of him wanted to ignore the message, to move on completely from that chapter. But the other part, the part that had learned to embrace growth, to embrace honesty, decided to meet her, not for closure, not for reconciliation, but for a conversation. As he walked into the cafe where they had agreed to meet, he was a different person than he had been when she left. He was no longer the man desperate for her approval. He was a man who had built a life on his own, a life that was more fulfilling than any relationship had ever been. Hajira had changed, too. She looked older, more worn. Her eyes, once full of excitement and dreams, now carried the weight of regret. She told Imran that things with Imran had not turned out the way she had hoped. He wasn't the man she thought he was, and she was no longer happy. The smile that once came so easily to her face now seemed forced, as if she had lost a light in her life. And then, as she apologized for everything, leaving him, choosing Imran felt something he hadn't expected: empathy. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He had moved on. He had found his purpose. And now, he could see her regret for what it was. He didn't need her apology. What mattered was that he had grown. As he sat there, listening to her, Imran realized that this moment wasn't about them. It was about him and how far he had come. When Imran sat across from Hajira in that cafe, he didn't recognize the man he once was. The man who had begged for her love, who had felt incomplete without her approval. The man who had tried to be what she wanted, only to be abandoned. Now he was sitting there calm, composed, with a life he had built for himself, one that didn't depend on her or anyone else. Hajira's words were laced with regret, her voice trembling as she apologized for leaving him. She told him how she had been misled by Imran's charm and how, in the end, he was nothing like the person she had hoped for. She confessed that she missed Imran, that she had made a huge mistake. Imran could feel a familiar pull of old emotions, hurt, longing, even anger, but something had shifted within him. This wasn't about winning her back. It wasn't even about proving anything to her anymore. His success, his transformation, had already spoken volumes. It was a revenge he hadn't planned for, but it was the most satisfying kind. The revenge of thriving while she struggled to pick up the pieces of a life she thought would be perfect. He smiled softly but remained distant, his heart no longer aching with desire for her. "I'm glad you realize that," he said, his tone steady. "But the man you're talking about no longer exists. I've changed, and I've built something of my own, something far beyond the life we shared." Hajira, taken aback, reached out, but Imran gently withdrew. "I'm not angry with you anymore, Hajira," he said. "In fact, I owe you thanks. Because if you hadn't left me, I wouldn't be where I am today." His words hung in the air, and as he stood up to leave, Imran knew that this moment, this power, was his true victory. His success was the best revenge, and it was more than enough. As Imran walked away from the cafe, he felt an unexpected sense of peace settle over him. For so long, he had been consumed by his pain, his desire for revenge, and the haunting memories of what had been. But now, as he looked back on everything, his growth, his success, the new life he had built, he realized that none of it had ever been about getting back at Hajira. It had always been about finding himself, proving to himself that he was worthy of everything he had worked for. Hajira's apology, her regret, it didn't change the fact that their love had ended. He no longer needed her approval or her validation. He had done it on his own, and that was more powerful than anything she could have offered. The real closure came when Imran understood that he wasn't the same person he had been when she left. He had transformed into someone stronger, someone more fulfilled, and he didn't need the past to dictate his future. As he walked toward his car, a lightness filled his chest. The chapter with Hajira was closed, not because of anything she had said, but because Imran had learned to let go and embrace the life he had created. And for the first time, he felt completely free.